Well, it's a great pleasure to welcome to What's Next, Tesh Durvasula, who is the CEO of Africa Data Centers. He joins us from the USA. Tesh, really good to see you. How's the USA? How are you doing?
We are doing great here at ADC. I am personally doing great, and USA is enjoying, the northeast of the USA is starting to enjoy their spring coming into summertime. So we're very excited.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, thank you for making time to chat to us today. We've chatted before to Africa Data Centers, and it's incredible what's happening on the African continent when it comes to data centers, this massive explosion and this connectivity. And I always have to remind people, whenever I'm doing a talk or I'm at a conference that, only half of this continent, it could be less, but that number's slightly changing, but only 50% of people living on the continent have access to the internet. It's just an extraordinary number to think about when you understand that we're in 2023. But Africa Data Centers have established themselves as a leader in this industry. You've got this incredible rollout. Could you unpack the journey for us and where you've come from and where you are and where you're going and how did you get to this particular point? Because it's a fantastic story.
Well, thank you, Aki, and thanks for having me this morning. So one more statistic that I would add to your stat or your data point is that Africa accounts for roughly 17 to 19% of the world's population, but only does 1% of the digital commerce or the internet traffic. And so when you think about those two numbers together, 50% are still unconnected. And even with the 50%, we're only 1% of the global traffic, then suddenly you realize what the opportunity on the continent of Africa is all about. And so that's what ADC is focused on, is focusing on that opportunity. About 3 years ago, we've started building data centers and acquiring data centers across the continent. We currently operate in four strong markets. We operate in South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, and we have a marketing relationship in Togo. And where we're heading next is we made an announcement to try to get to 10 countries over the next 5 years. You might recently have seen our announcement in Ghana. We've also purchased land in Rwanda. We purchased more land in Kenya to expand our facility there. And we had a lovely groundbreaking with the U.S. Ambassador Meg Whitman. And we're continuing to look at North Africa, other parts of East Africa, and we're going to continue to expand. So right now we're in the midst of that expansion. Like I said, we just announced two more new markets, and over the next 3 to 5 years, I hope to be able to say that Africa Data Center is the largest Pan-African data center provider on the continent. And I think it'll be spanning somewhere, like I said, 9, 10, 11 countries by then.
That's extraordinary. And, I've been watching this momentum over the last few years. And you've just spoken about it. As you said, you mentioned Kenya, you're expanding in Kenya. And I think that once that momentum is going, it's extraordinary the speed that it's going to create and the opportunities. And that's an astonishing stat that you gave us earlier as well. It's fantastic. And you just realize how this population of this continent is going to grow. I mean, when you look at the population, is 1.4 billion people at the moment, the youngest in the world. And even if you look at those projections on those mega cities, we need to have this connectivity. We need these data centers. But I guess to get to that point, there are challenges. And I mean, we're really in South Africa. It's a relatively built up area. And yet we face our energy challenges. And when you're building data centers, energy is the most critical part. I imagine energy is a big challenge for you, but what are the biggest challenges for a data center provider operating in Africa in particular?
Well, I think you touched on one of the key elements. There's probably 3 or 4 key elements. First, you need a piece of land that's suitable for the construction. Second is what you talked about, the power. And third is you need robust connectivity. And you need a jurisdiction that wants it, right? We need people that want it. We need commerce. We need other digital infrastructure in place, telecommunications, wireless. We need towers. All of these things help contribute to a strong, robust economy. But the challenges around power are very real. They are so difficult right now in some markets that we spend, just a majority of our time trying to sort through that. And it's not a simple challenge because obviously South Africa is dealing with load shedding, and there are people who will ask the question, who should be getting the power, right? And who should be what's the word? Not have load shedding take care, in their areas. In the end, the politicians will make those decisions, and we'll live by what they decide. But what we believe is that you have to have the infrastructure in place right now, right? You have to take advantage of this massive growth. There's varying statistics on this, but the average search, takes whatever, half a kilowatt of power, some megabit of transit and computing power. The average AI search is 5 to 10x bigger than that. And if it's 5 or 10x bigger than the current capacity, than the current statistics, that means you need more power, more data centers, and more connectivity. So I think the digital infrastructure business is going to be around for a long time. I think Africa is a continent where we can all take advantage of. There is this aspect of you touched on it in your statistic, 1.4 billion people, and you said young people. Well, I think you've heard me use this comment on your or this phrase on your show before. I call it the restless youth of Africa. This is that 350 to 400 million people between the ages of 18 and 35. They're young, they're educated, and they want to do things differently than their parents and grandparents. And that is what we're setting up this infrastructure for. So whether it be e-commerce, electronic payments, entertainment, streaming, healthcare, where government services, these are all going to be digitized. These are all going to be part of the digital economy, and these are the types of items that Africans want to have access to.
No doubt, and of course, the economic value that connectivity unlocks is just massive as well. It runs concurrently with the growth of a country's economy. There's no doubt about it. You can see what what data centers, what connectivity has done all over the world. When you look at African data center and you look at your organization, how do you compare globally? Are there areas where we still lag behind, for example? And I know that you're in the US and you touch on different markets, and I know that your roots are Indian as well. And I'd be interested to know where we compare globally. And for example, a country like India, which has got such a massive population, and getting those kind of people connected. Are there any stats that you can talk to us about and where we lag behind?
Sure. So, from a macro level, I think you're absolutely correct. History has proven that as technology has advanced over the last 25 to 30 years, there's been a direct correlation to GDP growth, literacy rates moving up, global wealth creation. If you look at just the 5 major North American hyperscale companies, so Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Meta, and just look at the trend over the last 25 years, that trend has gone up and to the right, so has the GDP. And the countries that have adopted those technologies and started using all of this infrastructure have also seen that growth. When you think about it globally, I've had the great benefit and blessing to have been able to work in multiple countries, built data centers on 4 continents. So India, specifically to your question, has very similar demographics to Africa in that just recently projected to take over China as the most populous country. And you have the same ability to have a very growing and large young population. I don't know the exact stat, but my guess is if you just look at kind of a demographic curves, my guess is it's probably in that same 350 to 450 million category. The advantage India's had is it's already been part of the Western culture, Western technology culture's IT stack. For over 40 years, India has been part of whether it be the original old call centers, the old switching telephone call center type applications. And now recently, there's not a company in the West that doesn't have an Indian developer or software developer, or a company that has an Indian software development house that's
or CEO. I mean, look at the CEOs. It's extraordinary.
Or working in their organization or touching part of their application. So the advantage India does have over parts of the other parts of the world of Asia or in Africa is that they've already been part of the IT stack within the West's technology infrastructure. But I wouldn't be discouraged by that. Okay. And the reason is capital is flowing, money is flowing quickly into Africa. All right. You just saw the White House make an announcement about supporting Africa. It was both Ghana, Angola was represented in that press release. So there's a great amount of interest in helping the African continent move up. Technology is advancing fast. So what took 15 years, 20 years ago only takes 5 years now, or takes 3 years now. So we can lay fiber quickly, we can get towers built quickly, we can get data centers built quickly. So we can close the gap. I think the biggest challenge that we face is that the infrastructure, right? We have to grow the infrastructure. You talked about the power. We have to get, every country has an ICT minister that is pro technology, pro growing the business, but he's only one minister. He's only one person trying to grow it. And you know that culturally, Africa has 51 countries, hundreds of tribes, thousands of tribes. And, just from a macroeconomic level, 51 countries and 41 or 42 currencies, which I believe is, it just means that we don't agree on much sometimes. We can't even agree on how to pay each other. So I think these are some of the intrinsic challenges that we face. But like I said, I think the momentum is there, and I think it's very challenging. I think it's very, the opportunity is real, and I think it's going to happen. The other thing... The other thing that India and Africa have in common is that you have this young population, but they're all getting educated. And there was a time when that wasn't the case. But now everyone's seeking out an education. They're seeking out an education in STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And those are the jobs that are going to be helping create further development of a middle class, a strong middle class that is now getting, taking care of things like, getting an automobile financed, getting house financing. These are the things that the Western world is already taking advantage of. The middle class in Africa need to take advantage of that as well.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting. And it's true. When you talk about the speed of this kind of growth, and in many cases, we have the ability to leapfrog many technologies just from where we are and the speed at which technology is moving around us. But this pandemic has been extraordinary for everyone in the world, and it's brought a rise of remote and hybrid working. I was at a big organization yesterday, in fact, and I said to the CEO, I said, "Where is everybody?" He says, "No, this is the way we work now. People come in a couple of times during the week. Most of the workforce is operating in hybrid mode, and it's extraordinary that the world's getting back to some kind of normality. But the impact of this remote working and understanding that people can be a lot more productive working outside an organization has kind of shifted that, changed almost to like a permanent mode, as opposed to what we had before COVID. What kind of impact have you seen on how organizations approach your services, and in particular this hybrid way of working? Because I get the sense that we haven't gone back to the way we were doing things in 2019. Hybrid mode is the new thing.
No, there's this general concept of the fourth industrial revolution and what's happening with dynamic work environments and remote work. It's here to stay. Don't think it. But to be candid, it's been here for a long time. It's just easier now, right? If you actually look at many senior executives who are in the commercial side of the business, they spend lots of their times on a plane. They don't have to anymore. You can, we are, I don't know, we're 4.5, what are we? We're about 10,000 miles apart. And, it feels like we're in the same room, right? So this is the beauty of it. And I tell you that I think that, yes, people will make there are some people and some jobs that are going to continue to stay remote, and there'll be an adjustment for that. Let me give you another thing that I'm seeing happen. There's always, for every culture, there's a counterculture. And part of what's happened with all of the great advancement with technology, there's been some negatives. Isolation, lack of camaraderie and bonds between coworkers. And that has caused people, and if you can see many surveys in the workforce where they're talking about, we're not getting the mentoring, we need more camaraderie. They want the feeling of being around the water cooler and in the cafeteria or the lunchroom but working from home. So you can't have both, right? And I think what's going to happen is that there is going to be a percentage of people that are going to want to come back into the office. And I believe that it's also going to be those young people. Okay. I think if you look at lots of the numbers in the West, North America, and in Western Europe, it's showing, the people between 22 and 42 are wanting to be in the office. They want to come into the cities. They want to come into the towns. There was a study just in North America that showed, the South is doing, the South part of the U.S. is doing much better than the major cities. So, and it was, again, in that demographic. So I think when it all said and done, yes, there's been this huge, massive movement. Technology helps it, right? Like I said, but there is going to be a group of people that are actually yearning for that human connection, knowing that in a room you build trust and increase performance and camaraderie. The mentoring and all of the cultural aspects of being in an office are going to be there, and I think they're going to come back. I think the post-pandemic, it's just like everything, the pendulum has swung a little bit too far to one way, but I believe it's coming back, and I think it'll come back very quickly. And I think people who appreciate that they have a workplace to go back to and have a culture where they can be part of are going to start taking advantage of that.
Yeah. No, look, that the company culture part that you talked about, I think that's the most critical thing because it's kind of the glue of an organization, and people are going to find a way of bringing that back because at the end of the day, that's what companies are built on, and it's all
Yeah.
about the people. Tesh,
Yeah.
you've had a fascinating history. You mentioned you've built data centers on 4 different continents, so you know this business backwards, and you've seen some very interesting trends. And it's extraordinary how data centers and the technology around data centers has changed over the last few decades. You know, we compared to the data centers you were building a decade ago versus what you're
Right.
building now, it's just totally different. What are the
Sure.
biggest trends that you're seeing at the moment in the data center industry?
Sure. So, two things. I would say that our ability to get construction done quickly. So there was a time when it took us a long, normalized for the pandemic supply chain issues. Uh, if you normalize for that, it used to take over a year to 2 years to build a data center 15 years ago. Now most companies can get the shell up in 3 to 5 months and get a multiple megawatt data center completed in under a year. And that even in Africa, if the supply chain is there, it can happen. So construction methods have improved greatly, and that's fantastic because it brings down costs and it lowers your time to market. And this is a huge breakthrough. The second thing is how the industry has taken on all of the environmental issues that it can. And it's done it not because there's some big rule of ESG or some big governance or sustainability. It's because it was the right thing to do. Every single one of our customers, all the big internet firms, the Microsofts, the Amazons, as well as all the African 500, the large banks, the large healthcare, the large governments, and wherever you go, they all have aspirational goals of carbon neutrality, uh, uh, lower emissions, and so we have done the same thing. In 25 years ago, a data center would use 1 kilowatt of power for the computing side and use 2 kilowatts or to cool it. Now that's coming down to just under one, and it's I'm sorry, yeah, just under one, and it's going to be even, right? We're going to be able to cool with all sorts of different mechanisms. So bringing down the cooling, uh, lowering the emissions, these have all helped our costs. And so it costs us a lot less now to build a megawatt of data center capacity than it did 25 years ago. So I think those are the two things, using all the great construction methods and all the materials and using all of our vendors to help reduce the time it takes to build. And then also all of the environmental savings, not for just savings in dollars, but savings in carbons and emissions and all of the things that you're supposed to save in. We want to leave a planet
Fantastic.
for our want to leave a planet for our children, right?
No, absolutely. No, you're 100% right. But it's extraordinary that you can build them so quickly now, a lot more
Yeah.
energy efficient. And it's, at the end of the day, it's about the cooling. And even the cooling, not only from a data center point of view, but just how we cool our homes. All these things have changed. I look at a typical air conditioner that you could buy, a decade ago versus today, and how much more energy efficient they are, which it's
Yep.
extraordinary how we're finding solutions to these kind of challenges to reduce our carbon footprints and the energy that we consume. You've got a very exciting job and a very exciting continent that you look after, Tesh. Can you tell us about Africa Data Centers and the exciting plans that you have for the future that you can share? I know that you're on an aggressive expansion plan. You touched on
Sure.
about Kenya, and you've just broken ground there again. You touched on a
Yeah.
couple of other countries that you're looking at. What does it
Sure.
look like for you guys over the next few months or perhaps years?
Sure. Listen, we right now we can go from Lagos to Nairobi, and that's good. So east to west, west to east. We've talked about Cape Town to Casablanca. So my guess is that you'll hear something from us in the North Africa region, in the Francophile area of Africa as well. North Africa is a beautiful part of the continent. It is home to many of the African 500 companies. And so we'll definitely be making some announcements over there. I think the next thing that you'll see in the business is one of the original vectors for growth in data centers. You could map it almost identical to GDP, right? Where does this first in North America, then in Western Europe, and it's kind of gone like that. Over the next few years, I think it's going to be more around population. Some of the things that are going on now in the continent are more around how the government can assist average Africans, in its life journey. Can you get your driver's license on time? Can you get your property taxes and your pension paid? How are you getting your benefits? And the governments are really working hard. So I think the biggest population governments are going to work very hard with the technology companies, both the integrators and the actual technology, whether it be Oracle databases, Google Compute, Microsoft Compute, AWS. I'm not sure who's going to take the lead in that, and they're all very good, so that's going to be great. But I think population is going to be a great vector. And if you dig down on that statistic one more level, Africa's got over 50 cities with over 1 million people in it, all craving services, right? Digital services. And that, I think, is going to be a huge boon for the continent. And I think that will be the area that ADC will be able to ride behind. I think we can grow under the shade of that population tree, and the fact that governments and large healthcare providers, large financial services providers are all going to start trying to take advantage of how to deliver services to those populous cities.
That is very, very exciting. And it's been wonderful chatting to you, Tesh, and sharing your optimism and your enthusiasm for the continent. And it's certainly a very exciting road ahead. Massive investments coming, which is great. And it's going to unlock a lot of economic value. So it's a very exciting time to be on the continent. Tesh Durvasula, who is the CEO of Africa Data Centers. Tesh, thank you for joining us on What's Next and sharing your insights. Appreciate your time, sir.
Thanks, Aki. Good to see you.
Thank
Cheers.
you. Good to see you.